Mayor, Dave Cull, is away on council business, so he will join us. Maybe he will be back in time for the end of the session, but he may not, so he is away on council business. All right, so our first submitter is Sophie Carty. Sophie, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. So my name is Sophie Carty and I'm the new Health Promotion and Advocacy Manager for the Cancer Society of Otago and the Southland Division.
Button.
This one? Okay, there we go. That better?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, intimidating. And I'm aware I have a very short time slot and that you're doing it in the different order this time. So we are preparing a written submission as well that's more detailed. So it would be great to kind of use this presentation as sort of an opportunity for feedback from you all as well. And then maybe I can adjust the written submission as per suggestions and feedback as well. So happy for it to be an interactive kind of more question and answer type presentation. So just a wee background on the Cancer Society. So we're not for profit and all of our funds are raised by the community. We have three major work streams. We have a supportive care work stream, which works to support people and their families who are living with cancer. And that includes our Daffodil House, which is accommodation for people who are receiving treatment at the hospital. There's our health promotion work stream, which is what I'm the lead of, and we also fund research. So the health promotion work stream advocates for health in all public policies, and we work collaboratively in the community to create social, cultural and physical environments where health and wellbeing is supported to reduce the risk of cancer. So why am I here submitting on the 10-year plan? Because urbanisation is a major public health challenge globally as well as locally, but well-planned cities can positively influence people's health and make cities more attractive places to live. And also wellbeing indicators are now being favourably used by policymakers to assess and measure city economic growth, which is something I've talked a little bit about with the economics department. Instead of the preferred GDP kind of measurements, lots of policymakers are using sort of wellbeing indicators like number of green spaces, the amount of cycleways or cultural and art pieces in a city. And up there I've got just a wee picture of some active transport happening in Otago, the Otago region. So those are just some examples of ways that cities can measure some of these things. And I think especially in Dunedin, people do come to Dunedin for the lifestyle. So I think using these wellbeing indicators is a great way to kind of measure city progress. So some of the key messages and kind of topics that I'm going to be talking about are the Smoke-Free 2025 goal and a bit about healthy urban design. So we've got 7 years to go before the Smoke-Free 2025 is upon us. And regarding the healthy urban design, we'd just like to talk about including public health professionals in city planning. And those are some of the main things up on the slide there, of some of the major things we'd like the council to consider when planning cities and new spaces and upgrades. So for the Smoke-Free 2025, like I said, there's 7 years to go, and recent research has found that there's a need for more commitment from New Zealand local government. And they did it was based on Canterbury region, and despite a number of smoke-free related submissions being received by councils, there was very little evidence of Smoke-Free 2025 or smoke-free community spaces in council long-term plans. So I'm sort of here today to do a little bit of advocacy around the inclusion of smoke-free actions in the 10-year plan. And this is a wee something the Cancer Society's put together about, I've just selected a random, mostly Otago councils, progress in relation to the smoke-free outdoor spaces. as councils have quite a lot of jurisdiction in that space. So green means you've made some great progress and changes and implemented smoke-free outdoor areas. Red is no actions so far. So that's something that I'd like. So for Dunedin, you've obviously made some awesome steps so far around playgrounds and parks and events and sports grounds and the transport hubs. But there are some spaces to improve or address next, including beaches, outdoor dining, CBD or streetscapes and social housing. And so I've kind of put up a few of where other councils are at around the region, and I also will hand out one of these. I haven't printed out a copy for everybody, but this is a national mapping of where all the councils around the country are at in terms of smoke-free spaces. And I think there's been a lot of I work a lot with smoke-free coalition groups as well, which are multiple organisations, not just the Cancer Society. And we've done a few surveys in the Octagon and on Bogle Street, which I think the council has heard about the results before. So we'd like to recommend that the council commits to a smoke-free DCC 7-year plan with a focus on promoting smoke-free council events, as even though it's green and having a policy, the policy is only good as the actual implementation and promotion, and increasing smoke in vape-free areas in the city. And I'm not sure how I'm going for time, but I'll try and cover everything off quickly and leave heaps of time for questions. So the other main issue that I want to talk about is healthy urban design. So our recommendation is that public health professionals are included in the urban design process, and that the new upgrades incorporate health design features as in the bullet points below. So we are highly supportive of all your great urban design upgrades that you've got planned in the 10-year plan. I guess with the considerations of including all those healthy facilities which promote and facilitate health behaviours to happen. So some of those marked bike lanes, shade provision, smoke-free outdoor areas, etc., and healthy food access. Yes?
Just one question on that point is the prominent stairs. Does that mean? Does it mean we should all be walking up the stairs and not taking the lift, or?
No, not at all. Access for all is definitely a part of the urban design. I guess it's using nudge behavioural theory, so it's more displaying those stairs prominently, so it's the first thing you see. So you're more inclined to take the stairs rather than not taking the stairs. So it's based on nudge type theories.
Thanks, Sophie. Can I just explain? Councillor Staines has withdrawn from the chair because he's involved with the board of your organisation.
Okay. Great.
And I'm a volunteer driver, but our management say that I'm okay. So we'll now carry on with questions. But first of all, can I thank you for your presentation, and also for all the good work that your society and its members do in the community. Councillor Lord.
Yes, Sophie, I just had a question, and it may be outside of the Cancer Society brief, but it's about vaping. So there's lots of people vaping now. It's obviously much cheaper than cigarettes. Does the Cancer Society have any ideas yet whether there's going to be ongoing problems associated with that, and is it a better healthy thing than cigarette smoking? Or?
We do have a position statement coming out very, very soon, so watch out for that. So that's a national position statement. But in terms of smoke-free outdoor areas, so vaping, this is kind of what is broadly going through our channels at the moment. E-cigarettes are a useful cessation tool, but they're only meant to be used for smokers and for a short period of time to help them stop smoking, rather than transitioning to e-cigarettes forever. And in terms of smoke-free outdoor spaces, we still want to protect young people and non-smokers from the denormalising the behaviour of the smoking behaviour. Yeah, and because it's only meant to be a tool to transition off rather than
Now the other question I had, referring back to your graph, the places that we are supposedly smoke-free public spaces in some of those areas, do you feel that there's inadequate signage? I know we had quite a debate about it 2 or 3 years ago, at that stage we left beaches off because, you know, lots of wind and people have got to go somewhere. We don't want to make them all demons, but do you feel there's inadequate, say, round the octagon or signage?
Yeah, the octagon isn't smoke-free at all yet, so it would be great if it was. But yes, I think keeping the signage prominent and upgraded and high quality is important to keep on top of. And I know your parks team has done lots of great work with renewing their signage and including smoke-free in that as well. But yeah, it's definitely something, and it's not necessarily an enforceable smoke-free outdoor area, it's an asking nicely. Yeah.
Just some clarity. The councils that enforcement's one thing, and we're not too worried about that. I think it's the messaging that you're really wanting us to give. And the councils that have gone through these processes, is it that they've put the signage up as a policy issue, or have they consulted with their communities and done a bylaw review, which is more tortuous to do, but at least gives you enforcement in the long term? So I'm impressed with, say, Palmerston North on that count. It appears to have done most things, but has it actually just put the signs up for dining out?
Yeah, most places just put up the signs and include it in their policy that those areas are smoke-free, and can do lots of communication with the stakeholders and businesses in the area and help support that, which we are also happy to support the council to do that. Some, mainly Wellington, is looking at bylaws, so it could be worthwhile having a talk with other councils around New Zealand on how those bylaws work for them. But yeah, and in general, it's a smoke-free policy that's not an enforceable.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Malley.
Mr Chair, actually Councillor Lord Moore has asked my question, but upon looking at your answer and looking at this figure, I see council supports e-cigarettes. How would we do that if we would also have a general ban on vaping in public spaces?
Yeah, it's not. I guess the thing is not about not supporting e-cigarette use because it is a useful cessation tool. It's just in the smoke-free outdoor spaces and protecting the general public. So they're kind of separate.
So that's almost it would almost be a yes, we support it. I mean, there wouldn't be anything functional with that because the functional part we're doing is actually around where you would and would not vape.
Yeah, so there wouldn't be anything functional around that. It's just a general cessation tool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Councillor Vandervis.
Thank you very much for coming along with your, I think, well understood message now regarding smoking. Some of the other causes of cancer, which are probably not as well advertised, I'm thinking particularly of very high rates of bowel cancer we have, relating to inappropriate diet, and cancers associated with alcohol.
Yes.
Are you also, I mean, obviously you're doing a big push on smoking, and I can see why that would be the main one, but are you also focusing on these other ones as well, and what are you doing to get that sort of message out?
Yeah, so that's one thing that I hadn't quite mentioned was that we're highly supportive of the Good Food Dunedin project. And we would like the council to consider developing some actions that they could take to also contribute to the action plan that is meant to come out of that charter. So it would be great to have some council-led actions and have some sort of mention of food in the 10-year plan and food planning because it is such an important part of the city. Another thing that I was going to bring up at the end around, and in the North Island, lots of councils have been having a lot of trouble with their local alcohol plans. Yep. And so they're looking, some of them have been thinking about making a remit because getting a lot of pushback from the industry. So there's a lot of community support and community want for a local alcohol plan, but the councils are finding they can't action it. They're being pushed back in court from the industry, and there's lots of opposition. So lots of the councils are looking at ways that they can implement some of these things without going through those appeals to the processes. So I'd encourage you to work with local government New Zealand and talk about those issues there as well, because, yeah, it is.
Okay. Would you agree regarding the alcohol issue that councils generally don't have the resources to fight the big alcohol suppliers, and that in fact the government should be not devolving this central responsibility to councils?
Yeah, it sounds like it's definitely taking a big toll on local councils to be able to, they don't have the resources, it doesn't seem, to be able to push through and follow through with their local alcohol policies. So it would be great if things could happen that didn't need to go through an appeal process, and the Cancer Society definitely submits to national government on issues like this as well, and would be happy to support and include council views or do a joint submission on things like that as well.
Okay. Earlier on in your slides, you mentioned recent research.
Yep.
We get a lot of people quoting recent research without actually saying who did it and who paid for it. Can you just briefly let us know who did the research and who paid for it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was led by the Otago University, and I haven't put it in there. It was led by the Otago University and the Canterbury West Coast Division of the Cancer Society. It is in my written submission, and I will submit that again, or unless there's a different channel you'd like me to... Oh, great.
So it was paid for then by public funds via the university?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for that.
Councillor Guerin.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Thank you, Sophie, for your presentation and all the work that you do. I was really interested to hear you talking about the wellbeing indicators, and I think you made the presentation to the destination plan.
Yes.
And we certainly took note
In
of
another
that.
role.
In another role.
Yeah.
But the question I have is around first priorities. If you're looking at the grid that you've provided us with, if we were choosing which of those to do,
Yeah.
would there be one or a couple that you'd put ahead of the others? Sort of?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think building on the momentum that's already happening around the region is a great way to start. And I think because of Invercargill and Healthy Families, they've made a huge step forward with making their CBD smoke-free. So that's definitely a space that the council could think about moving into, and especially with your urban design upgrades and making them more people-friendly. I think people-friendly and smoke-free is definitely goes hand in hand in making things more pedestrianised and focused on active transport and beautification. I think smoke-free fits really well with those. So any streetscapes or city kind of centre areas. I would also like to prioritise social housing as being smoke-free. Clutha does it, and so does Invercargill. And yeah, beaches. There's only been a few beaches that have been made smoke-free. Timaru, their beach, Caroline Bay is smoke-free, and Auckland has done a lot of work. Beaches is also something that's been huge internationally. And I know in Queenstown there's a bit of a drive and push around butt litter on the beaches as well, as an extra driver around making beaches smoke-free. So I think there's space to move in all of those areas, and there's high public support as well. And the Cancer Society can do, in terms of volunteering and voluntary smoke-free outdoor areas, working with the council to try and get those voluntary areas happening to support your work at the same time as well. So it would be good to work collaboratively on that.
Thank you, Sophie. No more questions?
Thank you, Mr Chair. Kia ora for your presentation and energy and commitment to this take. I declare my biases, I suppose, if I say I'm from a family of smokers, while I never myself have never smoked. But and being aware that this 2025 target was set, I think, primarily from the Māori Party's concern that multinationals were having a great impact on the health of Indigenous people. So I myself am not specifically in favour of your approach, because specifically with regard to social housing people, residents, because it doesn't appear to me to take into account the actual causes of why people smoke. And if we have been part of an economy which has basically punished and marginalised further Māori, Pacifica and poor people, why would we, further punish them by requiring that they not smoke in their own homes? So what arguments what links is the Cancer Society making between these causes and symptoms?
Yeah, there's actually lots of research that shows that smoke-free spaces are designed to support smokers with quit attempts, and lots of research shows that about 80% of smokers want to quit, and about 9 out of 10, so 90%, wish they'd never started. So the smoke-free outdoor areas are designed to be supportive and also protect their family members as well in terms of smoke-free environments. So smoke-free cars and homes is something that the Cancer Society promotes a lot. And there's definitely things that we can do to support and put extra support and considerations around. We do work in coalitions with stop smoking services, and there are definitely things we can do to be more supportive and to further help people to quit and keep their families safe from secondhand smoke. It's just about how we go about doing that. That's in the most consultative and appropriate way. And I would be supportive of working to a more collaborative approach on that.
Councillor Elder.
Just another question regarding that. Thank you, Chair. When you talk about smoke-free social housing, does that mean just indoors, so people could go outdoors and smoke?
Yeah,
I'm just wondering about that.
Yes.
A bit like cars, you shouldn't smoke in cars because it's sort of a confined space.
So that's what the Clutha District Council has done. They've kept the indoors. It's in the tenancy contracts and things, and I'd have a look at that. But I think it's a stepwise kind of process. So the greens on the councils is about the indoors. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that, because that's probably an easier first step than saying in the whole area or property. Yeah, thank you for that.
That appears to be the questions. Thank you for your presentation and your comprehensive answers. Have a good day.
I will try and I'll outline them in a more thorough written submission as well, if that's useful and helpful.
Yeah, we've got it. Thank you, Sophie.
Our next submitter is Paul Pope. Paul, welcome again.
Thank you. Nice to be back again. Actually, I was just all the way here while I was here, I was dodging hailstorms. I was just thinking, and Sandy will notice, it's probably the first LTP that Elizabeth Kerr hasn't come, very sadly. Some may say not so sadly, but it's just... Anyway. So thanks for having me here again, and today I wear a different potai, the potai of Chairman or President of the Dunedin Amenities Society. And I want to really, first of all, just highlight a project where we've worked really well in collaboration with the City Council, and that's the Town Belt Education Initiative. And the group of people that you have here, this is actually our student leadership group. So these are young people who are actually the leaders of this particular initiative. And here they are with the Mayor, Dave Cole, and also with their Link teachers. And we have, at the moment, we have 9 schools that have come on board with this. And we're looking to increase and have further yet. This initiative is a collaborative partnership. It's been made between the Dunedin Amenities Society, the City Council, the Department of Conservation and the Puketaraki and Otako Runaka, as well as various schools. And the idea of this project has been to develop the town belt or use the town belt in a multifaceted education purpose resource. So whether it be science, art, history, language, maths, heritage, culture and much more. We felt for many years now that the town belt has been underutilised from that perspective, and given the number of schools that are around this area, around the town belt, that we were losing out on a golden opportunity. And it was also important for the society to basically generate new stewards and new advocates, both for the town belt but also for the city as a whole. As a student-led initiative, it basically looks to develop student leaders who create projects and initiatives of their own that excite or interest them from the town belt. It's not just about killing small furry animals or chasing after weeds. It's also about art, it's about history, it's about science, it's about maths. But it's basically also teaching or giving teachers the confidence and understanding about how to use the town belt as a location for learning. And that's one of the things that we've learnt from teachers around the city is that, as I say, they have lacked confidence in terms of actually using that and using that outdoor experience. And so far, as I say, we had a recent event where we had about 70 school pupils and their parents come along to that. But as I say, at the core of this lies the student leadership team. So we were able to, with funding from the Department of Conservation and the DCC, employ a part-time education coordinator until June, and then with additional funding put in by the society, we've now been able to expand that position until June 2020. And we have the belief that this project will actually grow in huge potential for young people right across the city. But also that the rest of New Zealand are actually watching really closely with what's actually going on with this project. This is quite a unique type of project. Student-led initiatives are quite rare. There are only 2 other projects like this in New Zealand at the moment, and we are only one of 2 in the South Island, and certainly we're the only urban reserve site in the country that's doing this at the moment. I make mention of the fact that in your 10-year plan and part of your parks budget for the next 10 years has been an increase in in one of the funding areas for this particular type of project. And I just really wanted to highlight to you just how well that money is actually being used by these collaborative partners. Another thing I'd say is that, especially in light of the conversation that you had with Ngāi Tahu yesterday, is that it was the first time that that a Māori perspective has been taken on the town belt, and that's why we have brought in Otako and Puketeraki as part of this, as partners in this project. And that has been really important for us, not to just dwell on the heritage and history side of it, but to give a total understanding of the area. And so far, some of the projects that the children are looking at are scary in their technical ability. Some of them are looking at the management of money, the management of websites, the management of social media. Others are looking at animal and plant control. Others are looking at artistic and social history projects. It's all what takes their interest. And as I say, so from the point of view of being a project that's collaborative and has actually been funded through the three different organisations, including ourselves, I'd have to say that you've done very, very well, and we all have for that matter. So just moving on from there, looking at the Town Belt Traverse, which is an event, as I say, that we've run since 2013. The first time we did it, we had 500 people, and last year we had 900, and including 100 dogs. So we had 1,000 mammals that actually walked the 8.2k walk from the Southern Cemetery to Woodhall Gardens. And every year we have a slightly different theme upon it. Last year we had a concentration on the biodiversity aspect and urban biodiversity, and we had a massive turnout for that. And we've proved that the Town Belt as a reserve it draws people to it as a recreational resource. However, there are issues with the Town Belt, as I've raised a number of times. And obviously footpaths and tracks, handrails and other things and crossings still require some work to be done on that to improve. And I'm happy to announce that the roading department have come to the party with some of that work, but like anything, it's never always enough. So we would love to see further work on the maintenance and upgrades and protection of some of those areas for pedestrians, for cyclists, and of course for motorists. I'm not quite sure what's happened to my PowerPoint thing. It's gone completely mad today, but never mind. But like anything with the Town Belt, weeds, litter, vandalism, parking, and a general malaise, I'm afraid, in physical structures and signage really do create a bit of a dowdy and unloved feel for the town belt. And there is a need to continue that work and working on those areas of the town belt to improve it. One thing that does really concern us though is the lack of scientific monitoring on the current control of weed and pest plant animals undertaken by the City Council. It was done about 4 or 5 years ago, but that ended. We would very much like to see the effectiveness of your program, your weed control program, monitored so that that could be reported to the community. You actually need that information to show that you're doing your job, but doing it well. And we think in some situations you are, but you have no way of measuring that, and we'd like to know more about that. One of the other particular areas of the town belt is that it doesn't stay static. So obviously trees and other vegetation will grow moribund, and there is definitely a need in terms of the future health of the reserve for replanting and revegetation work more than perhaps what you're doing at the moment. And finally, the litter and household dumping is by far probably one of the most common complaints about the reserves, and one that continues on and on. And again, what we really would like to see there is the council be more open with what are the terms of its contracts with its contractors to the public, so that the public can have some surety about how those things are managed. There's a limit to how often Keep Dunedin Beautiful and the Amenities Society can have clean-ups around the place. But actually we need to see that happen on a regular basis as part of your contract performance. Now we understand it's there, but we need to know more about how that works, and so do other members of the community. And finally, encroachments of properties onto sections of the town belt remain. Some of them are historical. I was going to say hysterical, but some are historical. And that is another area where your parks team lack resources to actually undertake that work, have those sites improved under the Reserves Act. So at that rate, I'll leave it up for questions. Just the 4 birds there are actually tui chicks. Only one in that situation, unfortunately. 2 fell out. So yeah. So.
Thank you, Paul. I have a question. We had a submission from Mountain Bike Otago, who have identified Town Belt as a possible area for recreational tracks that recreational cyclists and pedestrians could use, and they're quite good track builders. Do they work with the Amenity Society in the area of the Town Belt?
I worked with Mountain Bike Otago back in the 90s to help them develop the Signal Hill area many years ago, so I know members of that. And there was a move back again in the late 90s, early 2000s to create Jubilee Park as a junior mountain biking area for children. With the Town Belt Traverse, we're not specifically asking for new tracks. We feel there are actually enough already. What we're asking for is the ones that you've got to be maintained in a better, more appropriate way. I think the issue with that is that it's not all just hard gravel tracks. There's the opportunity, I suppose, for cyclists to use existing tracks. But again, I don't know if you've seen some of the urban mountain biking routes that they have. The Town Belt lends itself very much for that. But there do need to be improvements in that, both for pedestrians, vehicles, and also, of course, for cyclists.
So I was just wondering, because they do maintain tracks
yes, they
that
do.
They're involved with. So it's just whether there's a resource there that can assist in maybe the upgrading of some of those tracks that need work.
To be fair, a lot of the areas that we've talked about with roading are largely asphalt areas and public roads. Actually, they're not public roads, they are roads that are within the Town Belt, and the responsibility for that rests very much, because they're driven with vehicles, very much with the council. But again, like I said yesterday, including we're always open to talk to people and have discussions with people, so it's always something we can talk about.
Thank you. Councillor Matt.
Queen's Drive, I'm not sure of the speed limit on Queen's Drive, but would you want to consider, as we look at shared spaces, and given that it's a scenic drive, that we look at setting the speed there so that cars and pedestrians can more actively cohabitate?
Oh, absolutely, and I think that is an important thing. And I know several years ago there was a plan for cycling and in the town belt, and anything to do to make safety in the town belt better for users is always a bonus. I think there is a time, will come a time soon, that we actually review some of the areas of Queen's Drive in terms of their use for vehicles and for pedestrians and for cyclists. There are sections of it that are not well used. Perhaps it's time to have a rethink. Members of the society will be cringing when I say that because they do not agree with me, but it is something, as I say, that we should have that discussion at some stage.
Any other questions, councillors? If not, thank you, Paul. Our next submitter is John Brimble, Sport Otago. Welcome, John. The floor is yours. John, you might just want to knock on your microphone. There's a button in front of you.
Okay. I'll just give time for that bit of paper to circulate round. So what you have before you is a statement from your draft Parks and Recreation strategy. That strategy was adopted in November 2017 by Council, and as stated, it sets the DCC's path for the next 10 years. So we're somewhat surprised that it doesn't appear anywhere in the long-term plan. It's not referenced, it's not stated. And that's despite it being one of the 8 Council's key strategies. So it implies that despite the extensive consultation that took place over an extended period of time, the community input, the goodwill and the collaboration that was generated, the Parks and Recreation and Open Spaces strategy will not be resourced over the period of the 10-year plan. So either that's a major oversight or aspects of the strategy will be addressed in the Reserves and Recreational Facilities operational budget. But having looked in detail at the departmental budget, that doesn't seem to be the case. So it looks as though the implementation of the strategy is not funded. There's no additional funding to actually action what Council has adopted. So on behalf of all those groups that were involved in that exercise, which as I said generated a huge amount of goodwill, we're asking the question, having adopted this, how is Council going to address the implementation? Because it has major implications for the city as an active city and contributes to being a great small city. So in addition to that, one of the major issues that was identified in that strategy relates to Logan Park. So I'll pass to Owen just to talk about that.
Yeah, so we're disappointed to see that there's been no money set aside for the development of Logan Park. We've worked closely with DCC staff and with local stakeholders, user groups, sports, quite closely for a number of years to develop a plan for the park. In 2016, we established a general plan, and that included the layout, I guess, of where different things or different sports would be played, and that sort of set the basis for the artificial turf in terms of finding a preferred location for that. In 2017, DCC paid consultants to develop that plan further in a little bit more detail. So again, another round of consultation took part with those stakeholders and ourselves. And in September, they presented the plan back to those groups for some final feedback. The idea being then that that plan would then be presented to councillors by the Parks and Rec staff. It was also to be fed back to stakeholders, so those that have been involved in the process, to find out where we're heading. So we actually haven't heard anything from council since September as to what happened with that process, what happened with that plan. So I think, just to sum up, there's two things that we're sort of looking at. One is we'd like an explanation from council as to why, funding for Logan Park isn't in the 10-year plan. And obviously the second part is to urge councillors to reconsider the decision and to allocate some funding for the staged development of Logan Park over this 10-year cycle.
You happy to take questions, or have you still got submission?
Well, the other issue that we've raised in our substantial submission, which I'd encourage the councillors to have a look at and read, is the Mosgiel Pool. So we applaud council's investment and support of the Mosgiel Pool, but we believe it's a huge ask of that community to raise in excess of $9 million. Mosgiel is part of Dunedin. It's not separate. We believe there needs to be a wider community contribution to ensure that that pool goes ahead. It's an intergenerational facility. The Mosgiel Taieri area is where the population is growing, with a huge increase in youth, and we believe that as part of the 10-year strategy, council just needs to consider the level of investment in supporting the development of that facility.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Vandevers.
Regarding the Mosgiel Pool, the community of Mosgiel floated the idea of quite a substantial pool on the basis that they would contribute, I understand at the time, $7 million to it. And the council agreed to this decision, and there has been quite a lot of progress made towards getting there. Are you now suggesting that we need to revisit that decision because the basis on which that decision was made is likely to be unachievable?
My understanding is that the group charged with raising those funds are struggling. There is opportunity to increase the fundraising, but they need decisions and probably direction from council to a greater extent that would potentially free up those funding avenues.
Council has already given this group $50,000 as seed funding to get their funding operation underway. And I understand that that was going to be sufficient for them to actually make a serious beginning to their fundraising. Are you now saying that that is insufficient and that they haven't been able to make progress for some other reasons?
I couldn't specifically answer those questions, councillor. That's something you'd have to put to that group themselves.
So when you come here and say that the funding that they are trying to achieve is unlikely to be achieved, are you saying that as a representative of the group, or are you saying that because that's what you've heard somewhere?
I'm simply stating as an independent that the challenge of raising that $9 million is quite significant.
My understanding was that $7 million was what was being looked for. I've always understood that that was going to be a challenge. But do you have any, I mean, we haven't heard from the group as a council that there's going to be a difficulty with raising that money. Are you basically flagging that that is going to be the case and that perhaps we need to talk to the group about it?
I'd encourage further discussion and dialogue with that group.
Thank you.
Mayor Cull.
John, are you aware that the reason or the basis for the community needing to raise that extra money, which they agreed to do, was that they were determined to have a pool of a scope and scale way beyond what could be justified for a population of that size?
Mm-hmm.
Are you aware of that?
Yes, we are acutely aware of that. We actually made a submission on that basis.
So then why would you think that it would be, well, why are you advising that council should now change its position and say that it is justified that we spend more of the general ratepayers' money on a small community for a pool that wasn't justified in scope before?
Well, as I said, I think there needs to be further dialogue and discussion with that group, and maybe some repositioning.
Maybe, John, you should just make you aware that there is a advisory group that consists of councillors and members of the trust who are preparing documentation to come to council for the long-term plan. So there is some work going on.
That's good.
Jim O'Malley.
There's actually 3 of us on that working group, and we don't want to really say what we're doing right now because that would get in the way of the group itself being able to function. My question actually is around the Logan Park issue. You are quite correct that it does not appear to be in the funding line. If the implication of that obviously would be then that there is no funds put aside at this moment. So what is your feedback to the council in terms of what do you want to see there in terms of how long has it been that we've been talking about doing Logan Park, and then what would this mean if there's nothing in the funding line?
Oh, it's longer than I've been at Sport Otago, which is about 14, 15 years. I think in 2006 there was 12 million allocated for the redevelopment. I think 2 million of that was spent on the changing rooms next to the hockey turf. And then the rest of that money got pulled, and it hasn't been back in any of the planning cycles since then, despite, I think us fronting up most times to advocate for it. The indications, I guess, or the expectation that's been created over the last 2 years through council is that we were on the right track, and that this plan that we needed to be developed in order for us to get it in front of council for this hearing. And so all that work's been done, a lot of time, effort, resource, not just from us obviously, but from council staff and from a lot of stakeholders has gone into actually agreeing to a plan. 90-95% of people are sort of happy with it. When I say people, user groups around the table. And so it's frustrating for us to see not only is it not in the plan, but we haven't had any explanation as to why. What was wrong with it? How do we fix it? What was done wrong? So I guess that's one of the frustrations that we have at the moment as well.
Councillor Elder.
So since that time in 2002 where you were able to spend 2 million, how would you say that the increase in the usage of that park, how many more people are using that park since then?
Oh, top of my head I don't have numbers, but it's full on. There's a lot of usage down there, and it's not just by existing users, it's about other groups wanting to use it as well. You've got not only the different competitive sports codes, but you also got it as it's green space for your students, for our students as well down in that area for recreational use. Walking dogs, just general, being able to play and use that green space. So in terms of, we did note in the report that there's no funding allocated to Logan Park. There's a wider review of the sports fields. We'd agree with that review of sports fields is needed. We know ourselves from the work that we've done with council from 4 or 5 years ago that there's some sports fields that could probably be retired. There's others that could get better use if they were maintained to a certain standard or they had better support facilities around that. Logan Park doesn't fit either of those categories. It's well used, it's not going anywhere, so we need to make it work. And at the moment, the things like the traffic flow, the parking, the access to it, all those sorts of things are in the way of it being a really, central sports hub for the city. So,
talking about the parking in the area, what is the feedback with, parents and mainly the users about the parking?
There's not enough of it, and at busy times, it's with the one way in, one way out, bus parking, picking up kids from athletics events, or if there's a major event on. It's a shambles down there. There's also a general, be careful when I say, when there's a big event on, the fields get opened up for parking on the grass at times, and there's a little bit of resentment, I guess, from the general sporting community as a whole, just from a community perspective, that when those sorts of events on, for example, might be just a large-scale regional athletics tournament, but yet that we don't get that same sort of openness towards the use of the fields when it comes to parking and those sorts of things. Generally speaking, I'd love to see if we didn't have any parking on any of the fields, and that we were able to create better spacing down there for.
And the other thing is, as you mentioned, there's lots and lots of students down there that use it a lot.
Yep.
Have you talked to the Polytech or the university about any partnerships in that space, or is there any possibility of that? I'm just asking it as a
they've been involved in the consultation and discussions, so I think there's opportunities there. The Polytech definitely, but also Rec Services, Unipol, not so much university, but Unipol Recreation Services, they've been heavily involved as well, because they're Unipol run tournaments, touch tournaments, rugby tournaments that uses the green space down at Logan Park as well.
Thank you. I think it's an amazing asset, by the way.
Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first one's a question for staff. Mr. Brimble's referred to his substantive submission. There doesn't appear to be one attached to the platform that we have. So has that yet to be submitted, John, or have it been lost in?
It was submitted last week.
Okay. Well, if we could get that uploaded, that would be helpful. So apologies for that. We haven't had a chance to read that. My second question is around the Logan Park proposal that you were discussing. Were you ever led to believe during those discussions and the development of that specific proposal that it had been endorsed by the elected arm of council in such a way that it would be expected to be progressed through the 10-year plan process?
Well, we never guarantee any funding, so no, I wouldn't say that there's never any funding actually tagged to it, but the expectation is that it would be put in front of council to be considered, and we assume that's happened, and now I guess what we're seeking is firstly some feedback as to why it's not in the plan, and some explanation why, so we can figure out what we need to do to come back next time round and try and get it in then.
Thank you.
Councillor Lord.
Question's been partly answered, but I was referring to parking on sports fields. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on the Tahuna Park and the motorsport events that have been told they can't park there again. Has, to your knowledge, there been damage done, or even at next to the hockey turf there when they have a big one-day or a cricket match in People Park, is there damage done to the grounds on those days, do you think?
I couldn't answer. No, I don't know. I haven't had that feedback.
No other questions, councillors? Thank you, John.
Thank you.
We'll just take a moment to change chair.
So John Evans is the next one?
Yeah.
That's lovely. I know. Right, our next submitter is Mr. Evans. Welcome, John. The next 5 minutes are yours
Your Worship,
to regale us.
Your Worship, the Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, councillors, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm here to discuss the potential and the possibilities for Chisholm Links. Recently, I think I should give you perhaps a bit of background. There are paintings in the Dutch museums of golf being played on ice in 1121. The golf was banned in Scotland in 1450, and it was only King James I breaking the law that enabled the game to recommence. There has been some discussion by many that the game of golf is dying, but having gone for 800 or 900 years, and obviously there'll be some fluctuations, it's very unlikely it's going to die in the next few years. I took the opportunity to run a golf tournament recently for experienced professionals over the age of 50. Many of them had played all their lives on world-class golf courses, and I sent a questionnaire out and asked them to moderate their criticisms, given the fact that there'd been a drought, but to be constructively critical if they felt the need to do so. And I just want to read some of these remarks because I think they're pertinent. Peter Fowler, who won the tournament, was the leader of the European Seniors Tour in 2011 and runner-up on the European Seniors Tour in 2017. He stated, "This golf course is a real dream to play. I love links golf, but this one in particular is special. I don't think people in Dunedin realise what they've got." Guy Wall, a gentleman who recently turned professional, is a very experienced financier in Sydney. He stated, "From the moment I got here, I said to myself, this is a hidden treasure. Why doesn't everybody know about this place? The golf course is unbelievable. It just needs money." There was some negative comment in the newspaper, and that was, I think, based around a comment by one of the members to one of the seasoned professionals, Mike Harwood, and he was disappointed in the stand of the fairways and basically said that he thought that the council should be using treated sewage and wastewater from the treatment plant. And I understand that the club has spent a sum of money evaluating that, but the problem with it is that fine turf requires water of low pH. If you use high pH water, you get weeds and ryegrasses and turf that's poor for the playing of golf on a what should be a fast-running links golf course. So I'm very much against the concept of the provision of potable water from the sewage treatment plant, even if this council were prepared to spend the probably $50 million to make it work. So I don't think that's a possibility. What I'm asking for here is a contribution from the council, not of money, but of water. A sum of $40,000 worth of water annually at times during the summertime when there is sufficient water in the town's reservoirs. So obviously if there's some kind of water shortage, there'll be no expectation that water will be used on the links. I don't know whether this is possible, I haven't researched this, but I imagine that if we can get non-treated water, spring water, perhaps from the Queen's Garden spring or some other spring, and that can be channeled through to Chisholm, then that water is extremely useful and adequate. So I'm open to questions, and I'm sure you've got some, so really this is a plea. Council owns the golf course, it built it in 1933. They opened it in 1937. In 1939 they extended it from 9 holes to 18 holes. In 1952 it was 4,100 yards, 3,600 metres. Today it's 6,400 yards, 5,700 metres. So in other words, it's evolved, it grows, it has to grow. And I think it's a wonderful asset, it's a world-class asset. It was rated by Peter Thompson as the second best municipal course in the world in 1980. There's Peter, Chisholm Park rated #1. He rated the second best after St Andrews. The professionals that came here believe that it's in the top 10 courses in Australasia. It's very difficult for people in Dunedin. Dunedin has a huge asset in the Otago Golf Club. It's the oldest golf course in the Southern Hemisphere, the 4th oldest outside the British Isles. A wonderful cachet. but it isn't on the sea, it's not sandy ground, and it's very hilly. So, and it can never really be extended. To extend it to, say, 7,000 yards that it would need to be as a parkland golf course is basically impossible. So what we have here is we have the oldest golf course, and we've got the best or second best links in the country. Working together, they're a tourist asset which I believe tourism golf in New Zealand can contribute to. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, John. Just before I open it up to more general questions, can I just get some clarification on the difference between the types of water you're talking about? You're talking about a high pH water, I assume you mean if it were from wastewater.
Yeah.
Can you clarify, and then you mentioned untreated water, so is water in the normal potable drinking water that we put out through the pipes with chlorine in it, is it high pH or is it not?
No, the normal drinking water that you use would be fine.
Right, that's great. That's
if
all.
If it was non-treated with fluoride, it'd probably be even better. But I don't think it's a big difference.
No, okay. Thank you for that. So further questions, Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Your Worship. John, can you just clarify for me? I see you're representing the Friends of Chisholm Links Trust, and I'm not familiar with the different groups associated with the Chisholm Park Golf Course. Can you just clarify where that group fits in?
Well, we went to the Chisholm Park Golf Course and we requested permission to run the tournament, which was granted. And we requested a meeting with them on the 27th of February about this topic. Unfortunately, we were unable to meet with them on at that time. So what we're doing is we are presenting a case to the direct benefit of the Chisholm Links Golf Course, and therefore indirectly to the benefit of the Chisholm Park Golf Club, because clearly the revenue which will be attracted by improving the quality of the golf course is going to be beneficial to the Chisholm Park Golf Club.
Can you tell us a little bit more about who we are, the Friends of Chisholm Links Trust?
Okay.
Are they golfers or...?
Well, the trustees at the moment are Daniel Ginn, who many will know, Robin Charters, the former editor of the Otago Daily Times, myself, and we've invited Jan Munden from the Otago Golf Club to be another trustee.
Could you just tell me a bit more about that spring you identified?
In 1870, the New Zealand Whisky Company made 400 gallons of whisky, and they negotiated the deal with the DCC, as I understand it, for the water to come down from Queen's Drive, and I suspect that Cadbury's still got their water for free. The Cadbury's aren't there at the moment, so you could divert the water to Chisholm.
Too soon?
And I'm sure that Mr O'Malley won't need all that water.
So I just wanted another question after that. So what would you do with that spring water? I mean, what would be the process if your dream came true, basically? What would you do?
Basically, up until October last year, when we had a wonderful winter and it was wet and good spring growth, the golf course was in fantastic condition, probably as good as it was during the 1980s, late 70s and 1980s. But there was a drought. Now, fine turf doesn't need to be green, but it needs to be kept alive. If it dies, you get erosion, you get sandy holes, you get rabbits, and you get problems you don't need, right? But you just need to keep the coarse grass on the fairways alive. That wasn't done this year. And it may well be that if we had a wet spring, there'd be no requirement for water. What this is about is ensuring that there is a supply of water from wherever it can be had in times of difficult drought conditions, so that the fairways are always kept alive.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Malley.
I actually just wanted to get that number, the volume of water you require.
Well, I don't know exactly how much the council charged for water, Jim, so whatever,
Well,
my understanding is $40,000 worth of water is sufficient to do the job.
$40,000 worth, it's not, so it's not 40,000 litres, it's...
No, it's $40,000 worth of water.
Okay.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you, Your Worship. John, is anybody in your group associated as in membership or in the governance of Chisholm Park Golf Club?
No.
Or Chisholm Links Golf Club?
No.
And you talked about a meeting that you tried to have or suggested to have on February 27th. Can you elaborate further on that?
Well, we requested a meeting with the board of the Chisholm Park Golf Club, and they said that they were unable to give us the time at that meeting, and they suggested that we have a town hall meeting at some later stage. And unfortunately, these hearings have interspersed with the time available to have that meeting. And I'm sure, as you well know, Andrew, that if this council were of a mind to grant this request that I've made, that the direct beneficiary would be the Chisholm Park Golf Club, its members and the ratepayers of Dunedin.
So has the board or the governance of the Chisholm Links Golf Club received a copy of this submission? Are they fully aware of what you've presented?
Not so far, no.
Okay, thank you.
John, are you, given that you're not part of the governance of it, are you aware if the club has asked the council for water or subsidy of any kind?
Well, I understand that there's been a number of discussions with the council about water.
Oh, Chief.
Yeah, the club have been in 3 or 4 times to have a discussion with the DCC about providing free or subsidised water because they are quite water hungry. Our response has generally been, firstly, that this club receives a higher level of ratepayer subsidy than any other of the clubs through various mechanisms. So it would be potentially a bit awkward for us to provide a water subsidy for one club without then offering that. But the suggestion was that the club, if they would like the council to consider doing that, because effectively free water is a grant, that they do that by way of a submission to the annual plan, and I don't know if we've had one this year from the club. However, at the last discussion that we had, the club said one of the things they suggested was the thing that you've referred to, which is that our pipes to Tahuna run under the club, and if they could tap into that, by then filtered and a little bit treated on the way to the outfall, and see whether or not it was suitable for use on the field. And so we were amenable to that and acted to facilitate that. And my understanding, I think they got a grant from the regional council to pay for that, and that work is underway. The water, it is very nutrient rich, of course, coming out of the outfall, coming out of the pipes on the way to the outfall, and would probably need to be watered down with wastewater water. But that, I think that work is still underway, and that it was certainly nothing in the vicinity of $50 million to tap into that pipe, but it's certainly not. But it wasn't cheap either, but it wasn't in the millions. Anyway, my understanding is that study is underway for what impact what is currently just sent out through the outfall, and what impact that would have on the grass, how much it would have to be diluted in order to not damage the grass and so on. So that's where things sit with us. As best I'm aware, the club haven't come back to us since then.
The problem with that is that they still require your water. That's why I'm here, because it would have to be diluted probably in a matter of 20 to 1, and that might not yet negate the issues of weed aggregation and other issues.
And that's what the feasibility study was to look at.
Well, I'm not that sure that I think the feasibility study, as I understand it, was undertaken on the basis of what do they do in other countries. But the problem with that is that this is there's only 294 links courses in the world. There's not an aggregation of them. There are 410 golf courses in New Zealand. Now, I think there's something like 50,000 golf courses worldwide. If they use treated water, it would have to be, we are still in the position of having to ask the council for potable water. Now, with respect to Councillor Wiley's questions, I think there's an expression that's called "don't look a gift horse in the mouth." We're not asking for any money. We're not asking for any administrative expenses. We're trying to assist the club in a way that makes sense to the city, its ratepayers, golfers, the council, and ultimately the city of Dunedin. If it's the second best municipal golf course in the world, why wouldn't it be a municipal golf course? Why would we want to have it competing as a private golf course that allows public to play with Balmacewen and St Clair? It doesn't make sense. It's the second best municipal golf course. It should be a public golf course where the Chisholm Park Golf Club play with full rights to their Saturday, their Tuesday and their Thursday. And the rest of the time it should be a municipal golf course, public, open to beginners, ladies, kids under 6, everybody, because that's where the growth of the game is.
Councillor Wilson, you have a question.
I'm just trying to, and I'm going to apologise in advance because this is going to sound adversarial and confrontational, possibly. I'm just trying to work out, and I think you've just possibly told me, but the reason this is different from any bowling club that needs water, any hockey turf that needs water, or any other high or irrigated property that is for sports fields, is that it's a links. It's the second best links course in the world.
I don't think that's a very silly question.
Yeah.
I think that's true. I think what this is about is this is an asset that Dunedin has that nobody else in New Zealand except Wellington's got. This course has held the New Zealand Amateur Championship, the second most important tournament in New Zealand. The other league's course, Paraparaumu, has held something like 4 New Zealand Opens. There's no reason why this course isn't better than Paraparaumu. We have wonderful views of the sea, fantastic turf. They have a problem. They have a high water table where when the tide comes in, their hollows fill up with water. So we've got huge advantages. So the question is why wouldn't we maximise something of high quality in this city and show the people that the city and the city ratepayers and the city council are proud of it and want to build it up and make this thing the best in New Zealand.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Laufisa.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can I just please seek some clarification? So my personal bias is that I consider golf to be a very elitist sport, but that's just me. I don't actually have any problems with the request, except to say I can't understand why this hasn't been a joint application made by both the Friends of Chisholm and the golf club itself. So,
well, I think that's just a function of the time situation. I only became aware from discussions with Sandy Graham of this opportunity recently. I scheduled the meeting with the club. That was unable to come about, and I cannot imagine that the club would be anything but happy about this approach. And I just want to say to you too, that's very interesting. It may appear to be an elite business, but there's a sister and brother playing out at Island Park who happen to be world champions. One of them I think is 10 and I think the girl's 12. It might be younger than that. They're world champions. And we allowed them to play in the tournament the other day and they were fantastic. And the old boys loved them. They went around with them, played with them. So it appears to be an elitist game. But you can go down and buy a set of golf clubs from, say, Wanaka Wastebusters for $10, right? And you can play at Chisholm for a reasonable sum of money. And I think at the moment now, for $90, children and their parents can play on 7 golf courses for the whole year. That's cheaper than a gym.
Councillor Lord.
Yeah, thank you, John, for your presentation. I was just going to ask, though, you made the comment, and in view of what the Chief Executive said about the availability potentially of the partially treated sewage water, making the assumption that that's free of physical contaminants, and it just comes in a liquid form. Is the acidity really an issue? Can you not just lime your greens afterwards, or? I mean, I sort of. Yeah, well, lime will change that.
Let's assume that you're talking about a 20-to-1 mix. Right? Well, you're far better to just take the water.
Say again?
Let's assume that in order to dilute the heavy metals, high pH water, you have to add 19 parts of normal water to 1 part of the sewage treatment. Well, it's probably not worth it. In other words, you've got the cost of tapping into the pipe for a start, which is, as Ms Bedrose has said, is quite expensive. And then you've still got to provide this normal water. In my view, you're better to forget about it.
I think the issues, one of the issues is the nutrient loading of the water.
Yeah.
So obviously, because of what it is, it's very, very nutrient rich. So you've got the pH issue, but also simply that high nutrient loading means that if you don't dilute adequately, you'll burn the grass and kill it. So that is what has led to, my understanding is the feasibility is around what is that dilution requirement and so on, and how usable is it.
Exactly. So. Plus you get high weed content, which means that you've now got, you're talking about adding lime and then you've got high spray content. It's probably much more expensive.
Just would note that all new septic tank systems they do exactly that, spray it out onto trees and gardens, and that's how they work now. So
exactly, but remember this is the distinction I think, Councillor Lord, I think must be understood, is we want low nutrient. We want water that is low in pH. We don't want fast growth. We want slow growth, right? And we want to just keep the grass alive. That's it. It's not a matter of we don't want to feed cows. And I don't want to suggest that we're going to have Chisholm as a dairy farm, because I'll be right against it.
I just wanted to ask a question regarding what's the difference between a municipal golf course and you were saying that the club used it on certain days. Does that mean that the public can have access to it like a park? I'm just wondering what that means.
Well, when I was there running the golf course, we had a fella called Blenny Sampson that used to drive his horses down to Forbury, down the road, right? And I was happy with that because it was a public road. But every now and then he drove on the fairway, which I was dead set against, right? But in principle, no, a municipal links is open to everybody. Okay? So in other words, if you decide that you want to play golf with your child or your grandfather and you want to go down there and you want to play tomorrow, that's okay. In this case, the Chisholm Park Golf Club, through decree of the council many years ago, has Saturday morning through till 1 o'clock or 1:30 sometimes, right? The ladies have it through from Tuesday mornings, and the vets have it on Thursday morning. Those times have been set aside. At other times, it should be a municipal links that's open to everybody, that provides facilities for the public in terms of alcohol, and there is some problem there, I think, which needs to be resolved, but in terms of food and beverage in the clubhouse, or somewhere in the pro shop perhaps, but basically it should be advertised, this is Dunedin's municipal public golf course, as distinct from Balmacewen, St Clair and Tyree, which are private clubs owned by the members. This is owned by the City Council and should be promoted as such because it's the second best in the world.
So, so that means if say I wanted to play golf, I wouldn't have to be a member.
Absolutely.
And I would go along there, and if I wanted to play golf, I'd pay a minimal fee, or what's the story?
Ideally, enough to fill the course. In other words, the first job is to fill the course. The next job is, once we've filled the course, we can raise the fees. But at the moment, the golf club has financial difficulties in terms of running the facility. And so it's caught between a rock and a hard place. If it believes if it lowers the fees to the public, then consequently their members won't want to pay their membership fee. So they're in a catch-22 situation.
Okay.
The council used to run it. The council ran it, I think, until 1993 or 1994. The council ran it, and Gavin Henderson, the Director of Parks and Gardens, was phenomenally successful in improving the golf course.
Thank you, that helps me understand that.
In the immediate area around there, around the housing and across the other side of the gully over from the top end of the golf course.
Tomahawk.
No, just in the gully that comes down through the Tainui school there. Is there any spring water in that gully anywhere that can be tapped into? Must be spring water around.
Well, it's interesting you asked that, because there's a crater. There's a volcanic crater, I think, up where, which is Lawyer's Head, and that area is always wetter than any other area of the golf course. And there's a suspicion that there's a lake, an underground lake, and you could tap into that. The question is, would you get to the bottom of it? Would you get down to fresh water in the rock below?
Well, if you went too far, if you went down too far, you'd probably get salt water. But it's finding a spring coming out of that, somewhere around that area.
All right, we're not going to resolve this geomorphic problem here. Thank you for your submission, and it will be taken into account when we carry on the study we're doing with the golf club. So thank you for that.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Our next submitter is Mr. Adams. Mr. Adams here. Welcome, Mr. Adams.
Thank you. Thanks for the chance to just come along and present a couple of contributions towards your 10-year plan.
Could you might feel free to sit down, because you'll be closer to the microphone, and it's quite important that you are close to it. Thanks, that's great.
Okay, so just two things I want to contribute. The first one is that I have to say I'm opposed to the idea of rates increases that are not approximating the inflation. I understand that there's a fairly big rate increase in the first year, and then it levels off, comes down, levels off. But I oppose something that's just way in excess of inflation. That's my first point. I have to live within that kind of restriction myself, and I think council needs to do the same, cut their cloth accordingly. The second one, my second thing, is that Dunedin's roads are getting pretty clogged. That's what I notice. And in your 10-year plan, I see that there's money set aside for roading, but there's nothing there that specifically addresses the issue of our roads getting more clogged. Now, I stand to be corrected on that one, but that's how I sort of saw it. We call ourselves a great small city. I should say I've lived in Dunedin now for just 24 years, so I've noticed a bit of change going on. And 10 years after we'd been here, I noticed the traffic seemed to be quite a bit heavier. And then about 4 years ago, I noticed that it's the number of cars in a queue at some of the major intersections it's big all the time. And it's increasing by the year. Now, I'm just stating the issue, and I'm wondering whether you're prepared to address it in your plan. Now, I'm just telling you stuff you know here, but George Street, Princess Street, Mance Jetty Street, Great King Street, Frederick Street, and that corner intersection up there, the one-way north and south, the Roslyn roundabouts, Cargill's Corner, they're all bottlenecks now. And our city isn't going to be a great small city if we can't get around in it. And that's the way it's getting when it comes to driving around. Now, it's not really my place here to sort of solve the problem, but I want to present the problem, and I think it's something that council needs to look at now rather than in another 10 years' time, because in 10 years' time we're going to be quite clogged. I think there's a possibility of, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, apart from the fact that I've put it down and talked about it with others. Some of those streets, say George Street and Princess Street, could just simply be made non-commercial, commercial vehicles only. That's all. And restrict all private transport. I think the way to encourage, not to encourage it, but the way to make the point is to just take out all the parking spaces in those streets. Now, that can make life pretty difficult for some people, of course, but I think there's a simple solution, and that is to just run regular, 3-minute apart buses up and down that section. Would be pretty simple. And council could actually pay for that. It's free. That's not a big deal. You just have a I was in Auckland as a kid when there was trams, and that's how we got up and down Queen Street, and it's simple. And it means that if I want to bring my car into town, I park it somewhere else out there and just catch the buses up to where I want, hop on, get up a bit further than the next one. So my real point is that we really do need to address the congestion issue in our town if we seriously want to keep talking about our aim as being a great small city. Ta.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. And I think you'll find that you have some very sympathetic ears around the table, and I think you'll find that a good number of, or some of the provisions we are looking at in the long-term plan actually address the very issues that you're talking about in the way you're talking about. So I think, Councillor O'Malley.
That's fair enough.
Thanks, Mr. Adams. And I actually just sort of want to follow up that last suggestion you had about buses and the regularity of them. Of course, you'd be aware of the fact that the ORC runs the bus system. So there's a need, obviously, for the two councils to talk. Are you planning on taking this submission to the ORC's long-term plan submissions as well? Because I think it wouldn't hurt for them to hear that.
No, I think the answer is no, because as far as I see, it's council's responsibility to solve the congestion issue. Buses is just one part of the solution.
But if we don't have control of that part of the solution, or it doesn't coordinate with the congestion, then it would be hard for us to achieve that end.
My thought is that this is where you take the lead and make the suggestion. If it's ORC that has to get into gear and do something, then that's what has to happen.
We've tried that.
There'd be many people here too, I think, who probably agree that ORC is sort of a bit of an ass looking after the public transport anyway. It's not their job, really.
Right, we couldn't possibly comment. Any other questions? Mr. Adams, thank you for your submission and for bringing a little mirth to our hearings. Thank you very much.
And I'm glad to hear that there's obviously a bit more in it than what I understood.
Yeah, yes, I think there's some stuff in there that will address your issues. So thank you.
Right, thank you.
And next submitter is Mr. Schumacher. Welcome, Ken.
Evening, afternoon, all, and Mike Lee as well. There's actually two of us.
Well, please come up.
You each have been double teamed this afternoon, so the one?
Yep, that's
You've
the
been
one.
double teamed today, so
fair enough.
Two different courses. So we're both here. I'm representing the Otago Community Hospice Car Show, and Mike is representing the USA Day. Both functions are held or have been held in the past at Tahuna Park. We've been advised that we can't go back there anymore, so we just want to actually put a voice across and say, can you readdress the council's decision. So you want to start with your notes, Mike?
Yeah. Basically, the USA Day run by Stateside Street, as I'm the president of the club at the present time, we run it down at Tahuna for 20 years. Prior to that, we were down at Forester Park, down North East Valley. All of a sudden, we're told we're not going to be able to go back due to potential, due to the possibility of potential damage to the grounds. In the 20 years that we've run it down there, there's never been any damage noted on the grounds. We've always received our bond back every year. And when we're down Forester Park, it was exactly the same. There's no issues with damage to the grounds at all. The show itself is basically run as a fundraiser for certain charities around town. A lot of the time it's for the hospice or other charities or entities that we feel that we can assist. In the last show that we had down at Tahuna there on the 3rd of March this year, we had about 220 cars turn up. On the Friday night, we use it as an assembly point for the cruise, which is where we drive all the cars around town for the public to see them. There was no damage done on either day. We carry out a full inspection after each show. And of note, 2 of our members even went down with trailers of gravel to fill all the potholes in on the road there so that the people coming and going at least had a decent surface to drive on without splashing mud or whatever all over their cars. The reason that we love using that venue down there is because the drainage is top notch. And we've seen that ground a couple of days before we're going to hold a show and it's been flooded, and then you go back 2 days later and it's bone dry, solid, and it's perfect. It's also, we've got good fencing and everything around it, so you can have crowd control. A lot of the families who bring their kids and all this stuff down, they love it because it's a safe environment. We have flick the fire engine and all that sort of stuff going around, driving the kids around. If we hold it in other venues like we've been offered, a body bit of ground on the corner of the oval, would you want to take your kids down there, crossing the road, trying to get to it or whatever? Plus we'd have to fence it all, which then defeats the purpose of trying to raise the money because you wouldn't have enough funds. So basically what we'd sort of like to ask is if we could possibly look at getting the decision overturned so that we can continue raising funds for charities and pulling people into town, because everybody who comes spends money in one way, shape or form on petrol, restaurants, all that sort of stuff. The girls go shopping. We've got a petition underway which we'll submit later on. So far we're up to about 500 signatures, which has been accumulated in about 2.5 weeks. That's online on Change.org, and we've got some paper signatures floating around as well. So yeah, we'd just like to ask if somebody could look at it and see if it could be overturned and get things back on track.
And just for the Mike's event is in March. The event I run is each November, about the 3rd week. I have applied to the stadium out of the corporate fund, I think it's called, to have the event there. I won't know till next month, but the issue there is that 4 weeks out from my event they could pull the pin. So we'd have nowhere to go with all the promotional flyers all done, the town covered in pamphlets. So that I've got that hanging over my head. So for that reason, we are keen to stay with Tahuna as well. We've only been there 8 years. This year would be our 9th. And out of that, we've given the hospice 30,000. That's just from people turning up on the day and gold coin donations when people walk in. As Mike said, it's very user-friendly. One gate in, one gate out. And having a grass surface as opposed to concrete asphalt is much better on your feet. End of the day too, the cars take a better photo against a green base than tar seal. It's been quite successful. The feedback from other venues or other events we've been to in the last couple of weeks has just been astonishing. They said, why? I said, I'll leave it to Mike and I, we'll go into battle and see if we can get the decision overturned. So that's why we're here today to ask. We have been to the media as well, just to get a bit of feedback and sort of, I suppose, publicise what we're trying to do and get more people on board.
Okay, thank you. And we undoubtedly will consider it, so that's fine. But are you happy to take questions now?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, so any questions?
Mr Chairman, this issue was raised the other day, and the Chief Executive undertook to talk to staff and report
back in due course. That's
Right.
the state of the play.
Yep, yep. Yep, so just so that you understand what the ramifications of that, it was raised in another forum within council because there was concern expressed by someone else, and so the Chief Executive is looking into it as we speak.
Well, that's reassuring.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, Councillor Vanders.
I've had some calls from people anxious to know why the decision was made, and it would be very helpful, I think, if the Chief Executive could let this forum know now why that decision was made in particular.
No, that's not appropriate at the moment because that's part of her investigation into whether we can change it or not, and I don't think it's reasonable to be canvassing that halfway through her investigation in public. So I won't allow that question. Any other questions? Councillor Lord.
Yeah, I just had a question. I don't know if this would even be possible. It would have to be run by staff, but I just wanted to hear the idea of, I went to a car show this year in the stadium, what's it called? Edgar Centre, yeah, and I don't know if the number of cars, like Mike, you said 220 cars at your event, I'm not sure, Ken.
We had 250.
250, so is that an event size that could be held inside the Edgar Centre?
The biggest restrictive parameter with running an event down there is the cost. Like we run NZHRA, like the New Zealand Hot Rod Association events down there, can cost you up to $10,000 to establish an event inside there.
Yeah, I was thinking if that was something that could be applied for under that stadium grant. I don't know. I know we do the Glenroy and the Regent under that, but I'm not sure about the Edgar Centre. But it was just a thought. But if it could be got for free,
Yeah, say for our event, we start with no money. We've got some key sponsors that come on board to give us some funds just for traffic management and some media work. But so we start with a zero budget and we finish with a zero budget. So whatever we do has got to be on the cheap, and that's why we've come to this meeting, because we can't afford to spend money on anything else, because in the end of the day, that comes off the bottom line, what we give to the hospice, which is what my event's all about.
And the other question I just had for you, Ken, was Mike's event running in March, generally perhaps end of summer, a bit drier. You've not had any problems in November at all?
No, 2 years ago, myself and one of the sponsors went to Tahune on the Friday, and we were ankle deep in water, and I thought, well, I'm going to have to pull the pin. Had a look at the long-range forecast and took a gamble that was going to be okay. It was a misty, drizzly day, but there's no water on the ground. The good old St Kilda sand, what do you call it, just soaked it all away and was completely bone dry. We've been there like during the day. There's only one entranceway through a chain gate on the far side, on the seaside, and even through that one gate where you get 250 cars through at a time, there's no damage. The ground's in perfect nick. We were there with the Star last week, or no, sorry, after Mike's show. There was not a wheel mark, skid mark. You wouldn't even know there was that amount of activity on the field. And we were just a bit concerned that whether it's Soccer Otago or New Zealand Soccer, dictating who can use a public facility.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. So there's two shows, one of 220 vehicles, which was the March 3rd show.
Yeah, and some years it can be bigger than that.
Yeah.
It's really weather dependent, yeah.
How do you lay out the vehicles at Tahuna Park? Like how many are actually on the football pitch and how many are around the surrounds?
They're all on the centre of the grounds.
Yeah.
Because that way it's inside the fenced perimeter area. So it's all about crowd control, safety. All the cars are stationary, nothing's driving around, and we have marshals that line all the vehicles up.
Yeah, we're the same.
Yep. Yep. And how, from the beginning to the end, what would be the longest time frame a vehicle is positioned in place?
Probably 6 hours.
Okay. And I guess what I'm hearing is the number one thing that you like about Tahuna is that it's basically the one entrance. It's got it defines the access.
Yeah, and like you haven't got public driving, you know, up to the actual boundary of the event. Like they have to park out on the street, walk in, and then it's a totally safe environment inside for kids and everybody concerned.
Thank you.
No further questions? Thank you, gentlemen. And your request is the matter of active consideration now. So we will
Thank you very much. And
Thank you for your time.
clock's ticking for me. He's got a little bit more time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, our last submitter is Mr. Newton. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, councillors. My name is Tony Newton. I'm a resident of Mosgiel. And I would like to speak particularly this afternoon about the certain aspects of the 10-year plan, starting with the pedestrian bridge. I'll read from my notes here in case I forget something that I would like to say. The need for a bridge is questionable, as are the benefits it may bring to the city. If it brings any benefits at all, they will accrue to businesses operating in the area, having been financed by the ratepayers. Your assertion that the fanciful bridge would be an artistic feature in its own right has no validity whatsoever. It is not the business of the council to provide toy structures for tourists to ogle at. Your business is to ensure that the city works efficiently and safely for the benefit of the people who live here and pay rates, and for visitors. I've couched my next points in the form of questions, because that's really the only way I can do it. I don't have sufficient information, and I would like the information, starting with, number one, how many people have requested pedestrian access across the road and railway to the harbour area? How and when did they make their wishes known to council? Two, in what way would this bridge connect the city centre with the harbour? 600 metres plus, with 5 busy street crossings. What research shows that people will walk this distance to view a rather run-down area of the harbour side, as it is at present? And if people are not expected to walk this far, where can they park their cars to access the bridge? 3, what type of commercial enterprises would a bridge for pedestrians and cyclists encourage in the waterfront area? Has the DCC had any contact with any such businesses? 4, you state that Mr. Van Brandenburg has designed a bridge, but in fact he has merely imagined it, drawn it and produced a very pretty model of it. How much has the DCC invested in this project to date? If this style of bridge is finally decided upon, will the design be put out to tender, or is this decision already made in favour of Mr. Van Brandenburg, and if so, why? 6, have any competent traffic engineers expressed an opinion of a bridge with large motorised leaf-like structures which are designed solely to be eye-catching, when this bridge passes over a busy road with nearby junctions and will be well within the eye line of drivers on this road? Number 7, how, in all conscience, can this childish fantasy be of more value to the residents of the city than a new pool complex at Mosgiel, or drainage systems that can be relied upon to prevent contamination by sewage, as opposed to reduce the risk of flooding or overflows which only happen in severe events, as stated in your 10-year plan? I believe I have some time left, so with your consent I will carry on to a summary of some further items which interest me in the 10-year plan. You do not specify what the future plans are for cycleways in the city, but if they are on a par with the recently completed routes, then they will be a further waste of resources, cause even more traffic problems, and not improve road safety for any group of users. To have placed cycleways along State Highway 1 with its constant load of car, delivery van and heavy truck traffic is frankly incredible. I've met no one who thinks this is the best use of the road system in Dunedin. It's confusing to cyclists and drivers alike, and consequently is widely misused by cyclists, many of whom prefer to ride on the footpaths. The council will get little credit for reducing the risk of flooding in South Dunedin and Mosgiel. the praise you would get for eliminating it would be beyond measure. The major flooding of June 2015 in South Dunedin is now 3 years in the past, and you blithely inform us that you are only now going to spend 3 years on planning, design and research before any action is taken, which does you no credit whatsoever. You would do well to be as ambitious in your flood control plans as you are in your plans to beautify the city with public art and the eye-catching and eye-wateringly expensive bridge to nowhere. The use of the phrase whichever option is chosen in your 10-year plan, referring to your 3 new projects, assumes that they are already desired and agreed by your employers, the ratepayers of Dunedin. This assumption that readers will automatically agree that one or the other option should proceed is a cynical and underhanded ploy designed to manipulate opinion and is unworthy of a public body. It leads one to question whether in fact this is a consultation document, given that the option to say no is not included. Finally, if a retailer or manufacturer or a commercial service provider informed their customers that prices were going to rise by 7.3% next year, followed by 9 successive annual rises of 4.5%, giving a total rise of 59.45%, their customers would quickly explore more cost-effective ways of carrying on with their lives, and the company concerned may well go out of business. The Council, of course, does not have to operate in a commercially competitive atmosphere, and as you have no shareholders to answer to, you are able to operate in this high-handed fashion. However, you do have voters to answer to, and I, for one, will eagerly anticipate the next election.
Thank you, Mr Newton. Now, you will appreciate that this isn't the forum for us to answer your questions directly.
I do appreciate that.
But I will clarify one point, and that is that the cycleways on the one-way system, on the state highway system, are the responsibility of the NZTA. They are paying for them, and we don't have a say in them. So there's little point in us considering what we might change about them because we don't have any input to that. Are you happy to take questions?
Pardon?
Are you happy to take questions?
Yes, certainly.
Sure. Questions, councillors. Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr Newton, I just wanted to know if you were aware of something that I've found as I've talked to the community, people perhaps aren't aware of. Are you aware that we have to, in putting forward a 10-year plan, put forward specific proposals, and in doing so we have to provide our preferred option? That doesn't mean that we have decided, but we are required to do it that way. Are you aware of that?
No, I'm not particularly well versed in the legalities and the intricacies of local government. I'm just here as an interested ratepayer and resident. But I stand by my point that the way this document reads, we're not offered the option to say, no, we don't want either of these.
So are you aware in the where the options are, and this is something that was widely canvassed with the auditor, the way that it was formatted, are you aware that in fact we have got options of yes and no in there? So you don't actually have to say yes to any of them. You can say no to all of them if you wish. Are you aware of that?
I see it in here, yes, and I had read that, but my statement remains that where was she? Whichever option is chosen for the bridge, the central city upgrade and the tertiary educational precinct, whichever option is chosen, it's just the preferred option or the other option, the expensive or the less expensive, is probably what more people are going to read initially, and they're left with I was left with the feeling until I got to the back page that I hadn't got the option to say no.
So you see it in the back of
I see it now. I knew it was there, but it's not as obvious as the text there.
Any further questions, councillors? Mr Newton, thank you very much for your submission.
Thank you. I do hope you will take into account what I've said. I realise I'm only one taxpayer. If you would like a copy of this, I'll leave it with you.
That would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will distribute it to all councillors. Thank you. And as I understand it, that's the last submitter for the day. So we'll adjourn the meeting until I think we're starting tomorrow at 9. Is that 9 o'clock? 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.